Well, hello, everybody joining us for our Rebel News live stream. Today is Wednesday, January the 22nd, and I am one of your co-hosts, Mary Lalini, and I'm joined by our wonderful British Columbia correspondent, Drea Humphrey. Thanks so much for joining, Drea, on the live stream today. There is so much crazy stuff happening, both in Canada and the United States. North America as a whole is just under tumultuous socio-political times. So we're here today to chat about all of it, or most of it rather, because an hour actually goes pretty quick when you have so much going on the political landscape. So for those of you who are joining us from home, we're streaming on a couple different platforms. We are on YouTube, which is, otherwise known as the censorious one. We're on Rumble, the free speech platform that doesn't censor things that we say or do or question. And of course, on X, which is also coming to be known as one of the other free speech platforms. So because we've been demonetized from YouTube for the last few years and questioning the science TM on some things to do with masking and other COVID-related science, we ask that you join us over on Rumble. We don't want to abandon our YouTube platform because it took us so many years to build it up, and there's a great following there. But if you head on over to Rumble, that's where you can give us what's called a Rumble rant. And so for a roughly $5 US donation, you can have your comment to us read on screen, and it can be a tip or a trick or just anything that your heart desires that you'd like us to comment on or just get across on a more broad platform. Please head on over to Rumble and do it over there. And so without further ado, we'll get right into our stream and also go through some Rumble ads, because that is a great way for us to generate a little bit of income from our live stream is by reading those Rumble ads. And some of the things that we read, like the 1775 coffee, are things that I can personally attest to. And so it's a great way for us to keep the lights on, keep our journalism afloat, because we are a 100% crowd-funded entity. And without our generous donors and some of these other revenue streams, we wouldn't be able to bring you this work that I hold in such high regard. And I know Dre does too. And I think the rest of the team here can speak similarly. So thanks everyone in advance for joining us over on Rumble and partaking in our stream and giving us some Rumble rants, help us get through the next hour, because there is, as I said, so much happening and going on in the world. But before we get into that, Drea, just a little bit more casual, how are you doing over there in British Columbia?
Save me, please. We'll talk a little bit about why I need some saving out here in BC. But other than that, I am doing good. So happy to be back on the show.
Yeah, it's been a while since the two of us have been together. Usually it's Sheila and David, as many of you might know. Sheila is joining the larger team in Davos, Switzerland right now for the annual globalist meeting of the minds at the World Economic Forum. So they're trying to scrum the most kind of influential key players there, which is also very important work, but very pricey work. So another reason why you should join us over on Rumble and give us some Rumble rants. I guess we should just get right into things then. We have the Trump tariffs coming up. Recently, our Montreal correspondent, Alexa Lavoie, was able to get into Trudeau's retreat in the swankiest of swanky hotel chains at the Fairmont. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the WEF situation and the, I guess, tumultuous relationship happening between Premier of Alberta Danielle Smith and the rest of Canada and our US-Canada trade relations. But first and foremost, we'll get into some Liberal problems. We have the Minister of Immigration, Mark Miller, admitting that Parliament was prorogued for political reasons, for the Prime Minister to be able to choose a new leader after he both simultaneously prorogued our Parliament, which basically brought everything, all parliamentary business to a standstill, to a complete halt. And he also resigned as Liberal Party leader. So until they can choose a new leader, we are basically governmentless here in Canada. And Mark Miller just confirmed that for us.
The Parliament's been prorogued because of the sclerosis that has occurred inside Parliament for the last 6 months, but also for the transition to a new Prime Minister, to a new leader of the Liberal Party. So the Parliament's been prorogued because of the sclerosis that has.
Yeah, I don't. think that is why Parliament should be prorogued. The fact that the Governor General, Mary Simons, gave the go-ahead for Trudeau to prorogue Parliament in such an uneasy time and landscape, as I've kind of already mentioned, is insane to me. But for them to come out and just now all of a sudden blatantly confirm and that this was it's basically to buy them time. It's to buy the Liberal Party time to choose a new leader. So they're not really concerned about, our democracy and the fact that we are facing a tariff war with the United States, our largest and closest trade ally and partner. No, this is so that it can buy the Liberals some time to choose a new leader as they engage in leadership campaigns instead of focusing on what is in the best and healthiest interest of Canadians and our economy.
Exactly. The absolute worst timing when Canada needs leadership the most. What are they doing? This. Not only that, we know that Canadians want an election and they want it now. I just shared a poll that just came out, I think it was yesterday, that shows that 77%, who they're voting for, they're saying we need leadership now. We can't have you guys going back and forth. Get this organized so we can figure out whether they want to work with the US, or I suppose some want to fight the US in this economic trade war. But 77% of Canadians are in agreement that we need an election now. And they're just like, yeah, for the new prime minister. It's like, no, it should be an election yesterday.
Yeah. Call an election. And we'll get to that in a few minutes, how Alexa tried to point that very specific and pointed question to Trudeau and was subsequently, we'll get to it. But first, I want to highlight the leader of the opposition, the Conservative Party leader, Pierre Poilievre, who is basically calling Trudeau, he's calling Trudeau a loon. He says he's the biggest loon in the Liberal government. And don't take it from me. Here's his own words.
So what's the Liberal game plan to try and save their government in the next election? Here's what it is. They're going to pretend that they've changed completely, that they've elected a new leader who's back to normal. They're going to put in someone like Mark Carney, and they'll pretend he's different because he looks different, right? He knows, unlike Justin, he knows how to comb his hair, and he wears normal navy blue socks and a nice suit, and he pretends to have had a corporate job. So they say this guy's a complete change. He's back to normal. He knows how to work a calculator. Make no mistake, this guy is just as, if not more, radical than Justin Trudeau. And today we got the proof. You'll never guess who's announced he's supporting Carney. The most crazy, self-described socialist in the government, Stephen Guilbeault, the crazy carbon tax minister. This is a guy who has been arrested twice, once for climbing on the roof of the Premier of Alberta to protest against the energy sector. The second time for climbing the CN Tower. He wants to ban road building, nuclear power, wants to shut down the forestry sector because he says that's the only way to save the caribou. He's against hydroelectric dams. And most important of all, he said he would resign from the Trudeau cabinet if there was even one more exemption from the carbon tax. He wants the carbon tax to apply on all fossil fuel energy and has said he would end his career if it did not go ahead. Now, this is important because it means that if Carney were not privately committing to him behind the scenes that he will keep the carbon tax, then Guilbeault would not be supporting him. Obviously, they have a carbon tax compact to keep and increase the tax because Guilbeault wants the tax to be 5, 6, 7, or 8 times higher. He wants to ban all fossil fuel jobs now. He is the most radical and fanatical of the Trudeau ministers, a guy who calls himself a socialist, and he's with Mark Carney. That's not because Carney is a normal, old-fashioned liberal. Far from it. Carney is just like Justin, just as radical. Don't be fooled. We don't need a guy who's the same as Trudeau but can comb his hair. We need a total change. Fire these guys. Bring home common sense conservatives who will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime, and put Canada first. Let's bring it home.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack out of that, but balancing the budget I mean, we haven't had a balanced budget since the Liberals came to power in 2015.
Because it
And
will
instead of,
balance itself.
yeah, as Trudeau infamously said, right? Instead of balancing or even closely resembling a balanced budget, we've instead seen former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, who's now vying for leadership of the Liberal Party, actually break her own budgetary predictions to the tune of billions of dollars. That's just grotesque government overspending. It is absolutely insane. And now with the tariff threat from the United States and the now President Donald Trump, 25% incoming on February the 1st. And that's only 2 months before our carbon tax is set to be increased once again on April the 1st. It's not an April Fool's Day joke, as many of us had hoped in the first couple years of the annual hike. But so Canadians are really taking it from every which way and being taxed from every which way. And I don't know how much more any regular Canadian can handle it. So Pierre Poilievre coming on and speaking that common sense, vowing to axe the tax, bring home common sense, restore government accountability. I mean, it sounds great, and if he follows through on it, I think the tide has turned and is continuing to turn. That Canadians want to see more of that as they are hit hardest in their pocketbooks. And there's really no safe space for Canadians, right? The Liberals always talk about, safe spaces. But when you're trying to escape the heavy hand of a tyrannical government who is taxing you endlessly without fair and accurate or adequate representation, especially now when we don't even have any parliament function. So we're not being represented at all in parliament.
What are we paying for?
Exactly. Are we really getting more bang for our buck? And meanwhile, you have Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, who seems to be the only rational leader trying to work democratically and work alongside the US government to rein in some of these threats and work for the best interest of Albertans. And I'm just sad that she's not representing, more of us, Canada, more broadly on a larger scale.
Yeah, I was born in Alberta, so I'm very sticking to that now. I'm so proud. I've been in BC forever, but now I'm like, you know what? I'm Albertan. But yeah, Poilievre spit a lot of facts there. I mean, Carney is the same liberal wolf. Maybe some are not seeing past the sheep's clothing. But another thing I noticed out of what he said there is what he's warning people. Like, there is no difference. This is the Liberals. You have, of all people, Gabol supporting him. So nothing has changed. And it reminds me a little bit of what we just saw ahead of the US election, where we've been joking about Biden and how unfit he's been, falling all over the place, air handshaking nobody. We've been talking about that for years. Even Saudi Arabia was making fun of it on their comedian channels years ago. What did they do before the election? All of a sudden they noticed that Biden doesn't seem to be doing well, and they sort of warm you up to Harris coming in. And there was that fear for many, is that going to be enough? Even though Harris has been the VP this whole time, is that going to make people say the problem is solved? And I feel like we saw that a little bit with Trudeau. I mean, it's that whole boiling the frog slowly. Before, if you said F Trudeau, you were a far right extremist conspiracy theorists. But then there was that period where there's all the news coverage saying, Trudeau's own people don't want him. And then people start to go, okay, well, he's the problem. Then they get rid of him. And they have this shiny new coin, this Carney. And so I think that video is important, whether people are digesting it or not, who knows?
Mm-hmm. Especially as Premier Smith puts it point blank, these issues fall 100%, she said, at the feet and the hands of Justin Trudeau. They have harmed our relationship with our closest neighbor and ally. And we'll hear, these are Smith's remarks, and we'll come back and comment.
If there's a failure, the failure lands at the feet of Justin Trudeau, who damaged the relationship with the incoming president by his antics in the first round of negotiations. The frustration that I have reading Robert Lighthizer book, where he goes through and talks about the ways in which Canada messed around and came late to the table and tried to counter with Mexico and ghosted them, it damaged the relationship. Let's be super clear about why we find ourselves in the situation that we're in today. It lands 100% at the feet of Justin Trudeau, who even just a few weeks ago gave a speech where he thought it was an affront to women that Kamala Harris didn't win. We're in a trade negotiation with a brand new administration, and we have a prime minister who keeps on poking his finger in the eye of the current administration and has damaged that relationship. So if there's a failure, it lands at his feet, which is why I'm counting down the days to when he's gone and we can have a reset. It's 47 days to go, and I hope he doesn't continue torching the relationship in the meantime. All I can do is try to repair and build relationships that should have been repaired and built over the last 4 years. That is what we do by having our office in Washington. We have good relationships with people on both sides of the aisle, because that is what diplomacy is. You have to be able to work with both Democrats and Republicans, and you have to refrain from expressing a preference for who you would like in the White House. And so if there's a failure of leadership, and if there's a damage to the relationship, it's 100% at the feet of Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, absolutely. And as they claim this Team Canada approach, it's like, but Canadians want you to clean up the borders and they want you to get fentanyl off of the streets. I mean, we've been saying that for years, and now all of a sudden we're faced with a threat from an outside elected entity. President Donald Trump is now saying, clean up your borders and clean up your streets, or else I'm imposing a 25% tariff. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, we better scramble and take some action. But instead of actually taking that action, which Canadians have been asking for the last few years, we're going to counter threaten and escalate those tensions with counter tariffs. It's just absolutely bizarro, upside down world. I think that the way that Premier Smith is going, by having that dialogue and being open to conversations and negotiations, being diplomatic, right? That's what it comes down to. The diplomacy of Danielle Smith, I think, is the right avenue to take in this time, and being hot-headed and countering with these threats like Doug Ford's doing, Justin Trudeau's doing. I know we'll get into it in a few minutes, but even BC Premier Eby is doing. I don't think that is the right way to rein this in. It's only going to escalate it further.
It is. And something else Smith said in another, I think it was actually the same, video there, but another clip, she says that she fears that this is going to be used as sort of an election, chip for them to use this for votes and politicize the whole thing even more than it already is. And I think that's already what's happening. And I think that's what's happening with our premiers. They're buddying up in some ways with the Liberal Party in their stance, rather than doing what's best for their citizens. Again, I'll throw to David Eby, which we're going to talk about in a minute there. So I'm very proud of Danielle Smith. I'm thankful we have someone like that on the international stage. She was at the inauguration. I heard Trudeau didn't get an invitation, obviously. But it's nice to have her there, and I wish it would rub off more on the rest of our premiers. Again, the common sense, like, I know that's the conservative sort of slogan, but that's all it really is just common sense.
Yeah, you don't have to be some sort of trained political science major to see that this might not end in anyone's favor if you keep escalating these kinds of tensions. But let's go to a quick ad break, and then we'll come back to chat a little bit more about David Eby's comments.
Canadians know the national anthem. They stand in silence to remember those who died for this country. But not every Canadian knows their rights and freedoms. The Freedom Passport will change that. It looks and feels like a Canadian passport, but contains the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms in a portable, easy-to-read format. The Freedom Passport. Order one for yourself and for all the freedom lovers that you love at freedompassport.ca.
I'm in Brazil, so I'm using a VPN to get on the internet. What's a VPN? It stands for a virtual private network, and you get around these government firewalls. Suddenly, the president of Brazil banned his whole country from going on Twitter. It was a political censorship news. I've downloaded the VPN from a company called PIA VPN. We've teamed up with them at Rebel, and it's a great deal. I got on the internet really quickly, safely, and even I'm a bit of a technophobe. I managed to figure it out with 2 clicks. And here's the great news. If you go to piavpn.com/rebel news, not only do you get a big discount, but they pay us a bit of a commission too. Everyone's a winner. Your freedom, your VPN, and a little bit of cash coming to support Rebel News. I'm using it myself to get around the censors in Brazil. You can use it too. That's piavpn.com/rebel news.
All right, I mentioned it before we got into some things, but let's go to a quick 1775 coffee ad. 1775coffee.com. Now, do you enjoy the free speech that Rumble is protecting and fighting for? Our show on Rumble is only possible thanks to our viewers supporting Rumble's platform by purchasing Rumble's products. Most of you drink coffee every day. That's why you have to try Rumble's 1775 coffee. It's actually some of the best coffee, and it's the same price as the coffee you buy now, but it's way better. Rumble 1775 coffee is free from chemicals, yet rich in flavor. This is because their beans are sourced from high altitude farms in Bolivia, handpicked, roasted weekly at their facility in Miami, and delivered fresh to your doorstep. And as believers in freedom, buying from Rumble helps fight back against woke corporations like Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts. Join the coffee revolution and brew rebellion with Rumble's 1775 coffee. Go to 1775coffee.com and use code STUDIO and get a free month's supply of their cognitive boosting supplement Limitless when you buy 2 bags of their coffee. Think about that. It's a crazy deal. And the supplement is worth more than the 2 bags of coffee. So go to 1775coffee.com and try their amazing brew. Now, David Eby, Drea, you're in British Columbia. Do you want to take the lead on what his comments have been recently?
Sure. And I know this is out of order, but I think we should start with the video of what he says and then, read the articles about what that looks like for him. So can we just go to the clip and then we'll comment?
It's moments like these where you have a choice. You can surrender and give up, or you can stand up. And for British Columbia, we're going to stand up. We're going to respond to tariffs. And keep in mind, this is not a fight that we wanted. It's not a fight that we picked. And in fact, we think this is going to hurt Americans as badly as it does Canadians. But we're going to stand up. We're going to support federal efforts to respond with targeted tariffs to make sure that the Americans understand that we will not surrender.
Okay, first of all, no, it's not going to hurt the Americans as bad as it hurts the Canadians. But what is he talking about surrendering? You touched on it a little bit when you talked about our fentanyl issue, but let's talk about what do they call fentanyl capital of the world? We've been nicknamed out here in Vancouver as far as cities go. That's what he doesn't want to surrender. That's what he doesn't want to give up on these borders. We've had in 2023, we had in BC alone, 2,500 fatal overdoses. Out of all the overdoses in Canada, of course, British Columbia has the most. We have more than Quebec and Ontario, even though they have more people. We had a third of all of the overdoses. He should have already, the fight was already here when it comes to what's happening with the border, what's happening to British Columbians. And we all know it's not just the people who are struggling with these addiction issues. It's everybody that's connected with them. And it's also the healthcare system. Even after COVID, when they were blocking off all of the rooms for ICU and no one was coming in, who was actually putting pressure on the system? It's the people overdosing in British Columbia. That's what was happening. It skyrocketed 58% here. So this is what he says we have to take a stand in keeping. It's sick, it's disgusting, it's twisted, and he should be embarrassed that another world leader is seeing what's happening here and having to put this pressure or this threat, America first, but also we're the neighbors. We're right next door in BC to the US.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was getting at before when I was stating that instead of just actually putting Canadians' wants and needs first and tending to these issues that we have been highlighting for the last few years and calling on the government to take action to counter them. No, now all of a sudden it's because of Trump that it's been brought
Yeah.
into, the mainstream media's news cycle and onto the radar of the elected officials. And yet, instead of actually addressing those issues and just, hey, let's actually clean up our borders, let's get the fentanyl off of our streets, no, we're going to counter with threats and tariffs right back at you. It is textbook bizarro upside down world that we're
Yeah.
living in. And again, with our parliament being completely prorogued and at a standstill. That's if the Supreme Court will decide February 13th and 14th. There's been a motion to immediately reverse the prorogation of parliament by a lawyer and another individual. I would have to go back into the case file, but a judge has decided to expedite this hearing to the filing of this motion to end the prorogation of Parliament. And so we may see Parliament come back sooner than I think it was March 25th is when Trudeau originally prorogued it until, which he gives new leadership until March the 9th to, campaign and decide for the Liberal Party. So that timing will be very interesting to see if we'll actually head into an election right there after
Yeah.
that judge makes his or her ruling.
Mhm.
And see what happens with the prorogation, because I think the timing couldn't be worse for us in
It
Canada
couldn't be. Well,
with these tariffs. It's absolutely absurd that we don't have a functioning parliament at this time.
the
And
threat
David
is
Eby's not helping.
February. Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, the threat is February 1st. What is that, like 8 or 9 days or something like that? That's ridiculous. So this is Premier David Eby's vision of how we take a stand in letting the fentanyl freely flow. So one thing that he's suggesting to Canadians as a whole, not just British Columbians, is to carefully think about spending money. Essentially, he wants us to boycott together the US and things like that. He says British Columbians should rethink trips to the United States, so don't take vacations there, and purchasing of American products as the province establishes a task force to respond to the US President Donald Trump's threatened tariffs. And if you scroll down, there's a quote from him. Oh, I got to pop up here. Let's just get rid of that. So he says, it feels very strange to say, but I really do think that for Canadians right now, when you're planning your March break vacations, when you're planning your summer vacations, if the tariff threat is realized, the deliberate economic attack on families in our province, in our country, by the President of the United States, that we really should think carefully about spending our money in that country. So, yeah, he goes on to basically encourage this boycott of happening again, instead of just trying to work with actually making British Columbia and Canada a better place as a whole. I hope for British Columbians at home, when you're at the grocery store and you have a chance to buy a product, right now you're looking carefully at the labels to support Canadian jobs and support Canada at this critical time. Now, here's the thing. That's the message we should always be saying. Like, why don't we say that to people? Why don't we support Canadian businesses as a whole anyways? But to say it now in defense of this, when the side issue is these tariffs are actually coming, we actually need to work to do what we should have done before, is just ludicrous.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that any Canadian who is checking labels and looking to see where their products are made will find that most of them come from China.
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult to buy Canadian made products when the vast majority of our manufacturing is outsourced to China, which is another thing that Trump signed an executive order to rein in. He wants to bring back manufacturing to the United States so that they no longer depend so heavily on foreign exports. And I think that that will lend into this tariff and trade war thing, because actually it's not going to hit the US as hard as we think it will, because they're trying to bring their manufacturing back home to the United States. And so naturally, that means that they will no longer rely so heavily on those external exports and other countries for their goods and services. And I mean, I don't know about you, but our dollar is absolutely abysmal compared to the United States dollar. I think last I checked, it was trading at like 70, 77 or 78 cents per dollar. And so that prevents a lot of Canadians from spending their money in the United States as it is, not to mention that we have people who are struggling to pay their bills and get by and heat their homes and feed their families. And there's record numbers visiting food banks, and the homelessness crisis is out of control. So I don't know what kind of la la land fantasy la la land people like David Eby live in, where they think that the vast majority of people can even afford to go to anywhere for a March break vacation or head somewhere else to spend their money when they don't get the same a dollar amount for their dollars. So this just seems kind of like silly thing to even rely on, because it's not factoring in all of those other variables that lend to the fact that Canadians just simply can't afford this, and it's not going to impact the United States in the way that I think they think it will.
No. And I want to invite everybody who's listening. Again, you can go to Rumble, do a Rumble rant, and weigh into things. It helps us be able to tell the news, but it also makes you part of the show. And I want to ask you guys, what do you think? Is this a bluff from Trump? Some people are still wondering. He's just saying this to get as much as he can in line, and then maybe he'll give us more time, or maybe he'll backpedal, or whatever. Me know what you think about that. The other thing, just briefly to mention, that Premier Eby is saying is that he possibly wants to stop buying U.S. alcohol in response to the tariffs as well. And that would be in the government liquor stores, which means it's still available in the the other options, which is interesting. I mean, when he says, we're going to fight back and it's going to hurt the Americans just as bad, it's like, yeah, no, this isn't going to hurt them this bad. But the other thing that doesn't make sense is you've already paid for the alcohol. Like, you already bought it. So what do you mean you're going to stop the sale of it? What happens with that money? Where is it going? Is that going to be part of the new safer supply? Are we going to just start handing it out for free? I don't know. So
yeah, it's funny because that was Ontario Premier Doug Ford took the exact same stance, saying they were going to pull U.S. I think it was bourbon specifically off the shelves.
Yeah.
And or maybe I'm confusing that with when we threatened the same to Russia in 2022. But anyway, that seems to be where Doug Ford is trying to go also with his counter threats, wearing his Canada is not for sale trucker hat, which makes him look, I think, even more silly than he does as a progressive conservative. But I think we have another clip here of John Rustad, the leader of the opposition in BC, who has asked Eby to rein in his comments.
Hi, John Rustad here with the Conservative Party of British Columbia, and on a beautiful sunny day here in Vancouver. Tomorrow, Monday, is the day that President Trump takes over. There is the threats of the tariffs that are going to be happening between the United States and Canada, in particular British Columbia. We have a government, both federally and now provincially with David Eby, that are threatening to expand this trade war. The results of that would be absolutely devastating. We need to be doing everything we can to try to work with the Americans, to try to make sure we protect our borders, stop the flow of fentanyl into this province, deal with our port issues, not creating a trade war. The damage that'll be done, tens of thousands of jobs could be lost, the amount of revenue that would be lost as a province, but most importantly, the damage this would do to our resource sectors, to all of the sectors that are doing trade with the United States is just immeasurable. I was just at the Natural Resource Forum in Prince George, the truck loggers here in Vancouver. I'm now attending the mining conference here in Vancouver this week. And I can tell you, all of those sectors are extremely worried about what is to come. David Eby is putting at risk the people in this province by threatening a trade war instead of actually figuring out how you work with the Americans. Ontario, Saskatchewan, and even I think Alberta are looking at how they work with the Americans, not ramping up the trade rhetoric. I fear that David Eby is doing this so that he can blame the Americans for the troubles that we have. He can blame the Americans for his debt and irresponsible spending. He can blame the Americans for the downturn that is coming in our resource sectors. This is wrong. He is throwing people under the bus simply for politics. Do what's right. Let's make sure that we protect our borders, make sure that we stop this flow of fentanyl that's killing people in this province, and actually get down to work with having a relationship with our largest trading partner, with our greatest ally, and figure out how can we grow our economy and help people in this province as opposed to just playing politics. This is what we need to change. This is what we need to do. And this is what the Conservative Party stands for.
There you have some more reasonable comments by the Conservative Party in British Columbia that surely will be spun somehow, or have been already spun somehow in the mainstream media to be radical, alt-right or far-right, for simply trying to be diplomatic and expressing some diplomacy about how is best to proceed. It's crazy.
Not just the media, of course, the NDP too. I mean, we do have a socialist government. I just quickly shared a tweet from Ravi Kalan, an NDP MLA. And so his response to Rustad's video is, John Rustad and his Conservatives need to take off their Make America Great Again hats and put on Team Canada jerseys like the rest of us Canadians. I think most Canadians, voting Canadians, do not want to go in any type of war with the US. I don't think this is a winning strategy for them as they think it is.
No, not especially given that our military is exceptionally weak at this time.
Yes. Oh
we have not met our NATO target in years, nearly a decade, if memory serves. And we have, focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion hires rather than hiring people based on merit. Our equipment is old, it's rusty, it's broken down. We've sent most of it over to the Ukraine. So we're really not prepared to have escalating tensions with a country that continues to meet its NATO targets and has just announced that they are bringing back all of their military and service members that were fired over the vaccine mandates, which I think was, a substantial percentage of the force. And so, yeah, I agree that diplomacy and being able to negotiate instead of escalate and counter threaten is the way to go here. But we're going to get more into some Trump talk after we take a quick ad break.
What if governments are trying to reinvent the wheel when the greatest teacher of all times has already laid out the perfect blueprint for a constitution for a kingdom of love, faith, and freedom? Introducing the Kingdom of Heaven Freedom Passport. This special edition Freedom Passport captures the foundational truths of love, ethics, and freedom for all. It's a powerful reminder of Jesus' call to love one another and to be part of something bigger that you can carry with you every day. Join the movement, share the truth, and spread the love with your family and friends. Get your Kingdom of Heaven Freedom Passport at freedompassport.ca. And right now, all orders in North America come with free shipping and a free downloadable song with every purchase.
Now, I just want to touch on this more bizarro world upside down. You have radical trans activist Faye Johnstone has went to the federal government and basically begged them to give guidance on U.S. travel ahead of Trump outright coming out and stating and putting an executive order forward that the government formally recognizes that there are two genders, male and female. And so by upholding biological reality, now these trans extremists are in complete meltdown. And Faye Johnstone, of course, is leading that charge. So she or he, however, which way the wind blows, depends on how they identify. But wants Canada to update its travel safety guidelines to the United States following President Donald Trump's executive order limiting gender expression. to male and female. I mean, this is the way our mainstream media spins and twists
Oh
things.
gosh.
So by the government acknowledging that there's only two genders, male and female, our mainstream media in Canada has spun that to be that he has a limited
Yeah.
gender expression to male and female. I think that's the whole issue with the radical LGB, or no, it's like it's 2S LGBTQI AA plus plus
Wow,
7 5,
Tamara.
whatever it is now. I know I have
You
had to
can
memorize it
actually
for some
say it.
reports. Yeah, I've had to memorize it. And so now
I refuse to. I refuse to. I'm like, I've got more important things to research than all of that. I stopped.
It really intrigued me when there was numbers included in the alphabet soup. So that's when I started to pay a little bit closer attention to see what exactly are they adding in here and what exactly does this mean. So anyway, I think that's the issue with the alphabet soup crowd, is that we don't want to just box people into these weird grasped, born out of thin air labels, and we should stick to biological reality of male and female and stop promoting the fact that children and babies can be born in the wrong body, starting them off on a lifetime of identity crisis. And so for simply upholding that biological reality, our mainstream media has spun that into being that now Trump has limited people's gender expression. I don't know about you, but I think that if you're a tomboy, you're still very much free to express yourself however you would like to in the United States or in Canada. And then we have, of course, leader of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre. He was asked by a news anchor similarly about this and whether or not the Canadian government, shall he be elected in whenever our next election is, hopefully sooner rather than later, if he would follow suit. It's a pretty funny clip, so maybe we'll just show that one here before we get into things.
First day on the job, President Trump signed an executive order, the U.S. government only recognizing two genders, male, female. They're unchangeable. If elected as prime minister, is that something that you're going to kind of walk in line with, or what are your feelings on that executive order?
Well, I don't know. Do you have any other genders that you'd like to name?
Me personally?
Yes.
I'm just asking more so if you're in line with what he is saying. Do you agree with what he's saying? Is that something that you would be lockstep with if elected as prime minister?
Well, I'm not aware of any other genders than men and women. I mean, if you have any other that you want me to consider, you're welcome to tell me right now.
Well, there's personally, I am a man. I am a people who say cis man. There are people there who they say they're gender neutral. Well, you are a man. Yes, there are people there who say they're gender neutral. Yeah, they say they're gender neutral. They're a trans person.
I feel like he doesn't
Is that
believe it
something
either.
that you would recognize here, whereas in the States, at least with their U.S. government, the way they're seeing it, there's only two.
I'm only aware of two, but I mean, if you have, if you come up with another list, then you're welcome to do that. But I'm aware of two. And as far as I'm concerned, we should have a government that just minds its own damn business and leaves people alone.
Hear, hear.
That was really good. I'm actually a little surprised that he answered that way, I must say. I thought that was good. I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, and it's always funny to see the journalists or the news anchors caught off guard, right? He's like, do you have any other genders that you'd like to alert me to? And, I can think of a few just because of the nature of some of the reporting that we do here. I can think of a few off the top of my head, but this journalist, he couldn't come up with any of them.
And there's I think last I checked, there's over 60.
Oh my gosh.
So they don't even
those I can't name.
He's asking that question. He has no conviction behind it whatsoever. And oh my gosh, when he said he's a cis, oh my gosh. Imagine if I'm married, but imagine looking at a dating profile and you come across a guy who says he's a cis male. Can you imagine?
It's a great way to just rule out any sort of dating potential in the dating pool. I do empathize for anybody who needs to date in this day and age, between like the people who just kowtow to the pharma narrative, to the people who are confused about whether they're male or female or something, I don't know, in between or outside of that. I do not wish that dating sphere on anyone. And I'm so thankful to have met someone before these crazy times.
Yes.
But anyway, it was funny to throw back to also Aaron O'Toole. I think it was in 2021 when he, at that time, I think he was vying for leadership of the Conservative Party, or he had just lost. He was just voted out by party members for his ridiculous stance on the handling of COVID.
Oh my God.
And he responded to, I don't know, he was having some sort of like 5-minute Q&A session with some sort of trans activist named Taylor, who asked him for his pronouns. I think we have just a 20-second clip of this from 2021. Look at this.
What?
Taylor, your 5 minutes with Mr. O'Toole start now.
Oh, awesome. Well, my name's Taylor. I use she, her pronouns. I don't want to assume from anyone else first. You use he, him, right?
Or they, Taylor, whatever you would like.
Okay, fantastic. I want to make sure that you're addressed properly. Thank you so much for this opportunity to spend time with you.
Taylor, your 5 minutes.
What a loser. Has never been called it. I've never seen that clip. Aaron O'Toole. My goodness.
Aaron O'Toole, yes, or just the O'Toole. Emphasis on the tool part. But, just even for the awkward pause there and for Taylor to just say, oh, well, I want to make sure that I address you properly or something. And it's like, if we're that concerned with how we are addressing people and we're not speaking to the larger issues that are happening in our world and in society, this is, it's creating this false victimhood where it's like, if you don't address me and conform to my version of reality, then I'm a victim and you're a hateful bigot. And I mean, I can see kind of both sides of the coin where O'Toole was like, or they, however you want to refer to me, like, he's kind of saying, in my opinion, like, I don't really care. Or on the other hand, he's also saying like, oh, I could also be a they, them. So maybe he isn't like considering himself a cis male. I think that's a straight man is a cis male because you can be male, but not straight. Like I don't know,
because they try to say we all choose our gender, so that's where the cis comes in. It means you chose the sex that you were assigned at birth is the correct language. But you're right. I mean, it is this victimhood mentality. Back to Faye Johnston, I mean, saying that we need this travel advisory. What I hate the most about it, well, back to that for just a second. How many other countries recognize there's only 2 genders? So why are we only focusing on the US? But what I hate about this victim mentality and this whole, oh, you want kids unalived if you don't want them mutilated or sterilized, is what they are doing to the kids. These kids, actually, it trickles down through our schools, this propaganda that actually makes these confused kids. And if you look at who the gender confused kids, they're the foster kids, they're the Indigenous kids, they're the autistic kids, they're the kids that are close to the system, they're the kids that don't fit in sometimes as well. And so you have the world or the media or the teachers, they're SOGI leaders at the schools, convincing them the world hates them and it's unsafe to go to Disneyland now, which it is for other reasons, I would say. But but speaking of bizarro,
and they're putting a wedge between the child and their family, which is their first point of contact if they're struggling medically or with anything health related or identity wise. Their family is going to be that stepping stone to help get them the help that they actually need, not some random school administrator or guidance counselor that isn't equipped to deal with the complexities of an identity crisis. And Dre, the most heartbreaking thing for me is to hear the over-representation of foster children who succumb to this radicalization of their gender identity being something different than what they were, born in the wrong body kind of talk, because those kids don't have a strong family unit. They don't even have, in some instances or many instances, a family unit to fall back on. And so inherently they're struggling with their identity because they don't have anything at home to identify with and to prey on and capitalize on these innocent children who are already struggling with who they are, where they come from, and where they're going, because they don't have a solid, grounded base point to, springboard to jump off of, is so devastatingly sad. And, you've reported extensively on this. They come to terms later on in life and they regret all of these decisions and are dealing with the health fallout from making some of these choices without informed consent.
And one more quick thing to add about the foster care. My previous world, I was in the mental health industry and worked very closely in that field. And even if the child has a loving foster family that they've been with for years, that foster family is not allowed to say anything. If they say anything against the narrative, if a kid even questions being gender confused and they don't sign them up for all the things that they're told they have to do, that's enough to get fired and lose your job. So they don't have any advice except for what the state promotes to them. But
so terrible.
Yeah, speaking of terrible, we've got to get, I've just been waiting the whole time to talk about this next thing. Are we going to the bishop? The
let's go through a couple. Okay,
did we miss stuff? Go ahead, Tamara. I took over there.
We have some Rumble rants that I want to get to, because you asked people to chime in and they did. And so I just want to get to them in a timely way. So Wrong Way 54 gives $5. Thank you so much. Hello, ladies. Thank you again for all you at Rebel have done for us. Is it possible to have one of your amazing lawyers to help us at retirement homes to get rid of the dividers and COVID-19 signs? That's really interesting. There's a lot of crazy things happening still in long-term care and nursing homes, retirement homes, to do not only with COVID-19, but the flu. And a lot of these measures actually predate the COVID hysteria. So nursing homes, retirement homes, long-term care homes, they would go into lockdown anytime there was a flu outbreak. And what I've come to learn is that didn't even necessarily need to be confirmed. And other people, especially throughout COVID, if there was one person sick with COVID-like symptoms, they just assumed that everybody else also had COVID without testing them or monitoring for other symptoms, etc. But I don't know how much that still exists to this day. And so this is a little bit news to me that this is still going on. Depending on where you're located or the province, territory, where this is happening in Canada, send us a tip at tips@rebelnews.com. There are often tips. We get thousands a day, so we simply can't get to every single one of them. But let us know, or maybe in the comments, let us know where this is happening. If you have the name of a home, sometimes people don't want to say the name of the home publicly because they fear that their loved one will face repercussions for them speaking out. So if you can figure out a way to let us know where this is happening, then we can send somebody who's more in that locale to report on that.
And if somebody needs legal help, go to our friends at the Democracy Fund.
Yes.
.com. So just search the democracyfund.ca and you'll find them.
That's not to be confused with, I think there's a Democracy Fund in the United States. So make sure that you're going to the Canadian one. Yes. Yeah. Ryerson Gary gives $5. 90 some years ago, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, I hope I said that right, Howley, and retaliatory tariffs along with Roosevelt's New Deal turned a mild recession into the Great Depression that lasted 10 years. Yeah, beware, folks. Let's look at history, right? History repeats itself. And so here we are. And that is a nice reminder of where these sort of escalating measures can potentially take us. There are some economists who already say that we're in a recession. It's just being hidden by the money printing that's going on by the government. And so I tend to believe that that's where we already are with the economy. And who knows how else that will be impacted by these tariffs if they come into force on February the 1st. We have one more from Jetta Bursey, $5 again. Thank you. God only created them male and female, nothing else. Anything else is telling God that he is wrong.
Yeah, Genesis and Matthew.
We were made in his image. Okay, so before we get into our last topics and what Drea would like to touch on. I'm going to read another quick Rumble ad here from Sticker Pack. Are you ready to show your support in style? Sticker Mule has a fantastic offer just for you. For a limited time, you can grab free Trump stickers. Yes, you heard that right. Free. Whether you want to decorate your laptop, car, or office space, these high-quality, durable stickers are perfect for making a statement. Just imagine how great they'll look, and they're super easy to apply. Here's how it works. Head on over to stickerpack.com, sign up and claim your free stickers and watch the fun unfold. Don't miss out on this exclusive offer. Stock is limited, so act fast. Spread the word and let your voice be heard with Sticker Mule's awesome stickers. Once again, visit stickerpack.com today and grab your free Trump stickers before they're gone. All right. So yeah, we haven't gotten
we have to get
one
to
of
the
our
Alexa
headlines.
news.
Yes. So Alexa, and I think we have a clip here to show, as I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, was covering Trudeau's latest retreat at the swanky Fairmont in Quebec, Montebello, I believe it was. And we have a clip here. I'm not sure if it's the full clip or we have just a few minute one. If it's the full clip, maybe we can just narrow it down to the moment that Alexa tries to sneak in there to ask Justin Trudeau an accountability question. Do we have that pulled up yet?
So now let's see the full report.
Look at that. They're opening the doors.
There's no one there.
Yeah.
It's so empty.
Mr. Trudeau, why won't you call for an election? Mr. Trudeau, why would you call for an election? Mr. Trudeau, why you don't call for an election? Why Canadian won an election?
Grabbing her.
Do not touch me. Monsieur Guillon, comment ça va bien?
Ça va bien, excuse-moi.
Pourquoi vous continuez à nous refuser à venir à vos événements? Les Canadiens veulent avoir la comptabilité.
Vous n'êtes pas accrédité.
Hein?
Merci beaucoup. Okay,
mais non, parce que vous accréditez seulement les médias qui sont gentils et qui sont favorables à votre image.
Aussi longtemps que vous allez m'enregistrer tout le temps, je ne dirai pas un mot.
Ben, c'est pas vous qui, justement, avez fait un bois de fait sur un de nos journalistes dans le temps?
Salut. Je vais peut-être te revoir.
So you see, we're all being escorted.
You see, people, it really irks me when people think that they can put their hands on you.
Yeah.
Especially as females, you know, she's there with Guillaume, so there's two of them, but otherwise Alexa's alone there. And with these people, she's not posing a threat. She's not being violent. She's not enticing any of those things. And for them to think that it is okay to touch her really deeply concerns me. There was an incident, I guess back in December where, you know, not the same, but similar enough, where we were trying to tour a low barrier shelter in Cobourg, just outside where I live. And it was supposed to be open to the media. The event, they stated online, everything publicly posted was that it was open to media, but then they quietly opened early for media, and they didn't actually publicly state that anywhere. And so when we got there, they said, sorry, you're not allowed. And I started asking some questions and why is that? And where was this publicly posted? And where could I find that information? And there was two individuals that started to kind of like escort me out, and I had already had my back turned, and I was just, you know, slowly making my way out while I was asking some questions, because otherwise you miss, in many instances, an opportunity to get those questions across. And I had to say, I think at least 3 times, don't touch me. Like, do not put your hands on me. I am leaving and I will leave, but you don't have the right to place your hands on me. And having to remind people that is a really weird place to be. And then you have people like, you know, the radical left who always claims to be, again, this victimhood mentality of, oh, we're being targeted online for some mean tweets. And then you have our journalists like Alexa, who's grabbed. You can see that they are grabbing her arm and pulling her down the stairs. And that isn't condemned by anyone anywhere widely on a more broad platform. This is really concerning behavior.
And she was just asking questions. She was asking questions that Canadians want to know the answers to. And, you know, I got picked up as well when I tried asking Trudeau a question Canadians wanted the answer to. And they tossed me aside, like, pick me up off my feet and tossed me aside like a rag doll. It is really concerning when you're a female. And it just gets ignored. Like, where's the groups that stand up for, you know, free press? They're just silent over everything. And they keep interviewing Rachel Gilmore, who isn't even a journalist anymore.
who's been fired, I think, twice at least now from her position. So, I mean, if you want to call yourself a credible journalist, well, you keep getting fired. So maybe you're not. But we'll have a more
annoying.
Right. And maybe people actually don't agree with your radical stances and they just can't outwardly say that to you. So they just fire you instead. Well, and she also got Global News sued by the veteran James Topp for calling him, I think, a white supremacist and other things. And so he's suing Global.
All the tags,
yeah, all the buzzwords.
If you searched white supremacist, his name was popping up because they made it look like that when you search. So bad.
But anyway, we'll have a more fulsome report out from Alexa. She got the question to Trudeau and how she was treated out, and then she was also detained and fined, falsely detained and falsely fined for an alleged seatbelt infraction. So we'll have that report out today. We sought some legal advice for Alexa on that. They vowed to Rebel News' crowdfunding her defense. I think it's standwithalexa.com is the crowdfunding website where you can find that information, and you can stay tuned as those reports are released, because we've retained a lawyer and we'll be fighting those fines for her, which also included 3 demerit points. And she was a passenger. She wasn't even driving. So the police, you know, after they left, kind of
that's crazy.
Targeted them.
I didn't realize she wasn't driving.
Yeah, they targeted them, and Alexa was fined nearly $1,000 and 3 demerit points for not wearing her seatbelt, allegedly. But she says she was recording the whole time, and I don't want to give out, you know, too many of the details. But she was recording the whole time, and you can actually hear her seatbelt clicking when they're recording, because Alexa she's so smart in that way. She's always rolling. And actually, speaking of Gilmore, it's funny because I think there was a thing a couple months ago where Gilmore ran into Alexa on the street, and she's like, "Are you filming me?" And it's like, you don't understand the concept of B-roll, where you're always filming. You never know who you're going to come across. And you're also just sometimes getting like general visuals of the place that you are and where you're covering, so that the viewer can have a more fulsome visual of what it looks like where you are and what's going on and all these things. And Gilmore was like, me? On the streets, you're targeting me. And it was just so funny because she, you know, claims to be like this holier than thou journalist, and I'm here because I'm a journalist. And meanwhile, she doesn't understand the concept of gathering visuals and B-roll for reports. So it's funny to contrast that.
The other angle that clearly showed she speaks to Alexa, and Alexa's like, what? Like, Alexa actually turns to her after she thinks she's recording. It was really weird.
Yeah, the whole interaction was very bizarre, and Alexa didn't even know who she was at first, and then she was like, "Oh wait, I think I know." But sometimes if I were to see her out in the wild, I don't know, it's hard to differentiate between her and Faye Johnstone, so I would probably be confused myself. Anyway, I don't know if we have any more super chats or Rumble rants. Or Drea, if you want to just spend a couple minutes quickly on the bishop and the reaction at the inauguration from Monday.
Sure. I would like to. This is a nutty thing that happened. I mean, we could end on it, but this is a bishop that's being celebrated by the mainstream media. A Christian all of a sudden is getting praise in the mainstream media. This is why, of course.
In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families, some who fear for their lives. And the people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meat packing plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals, they may not be citizens or have the proper documentation, but the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals. They pay taxes and are good neighbors. They are faithful members of our churches and mosques, synagogues, wadara, and temples. I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away, and that you help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here. Our God teaches us that we are to be merciful to the stranger, for we were all once strangers in this land.
Yeah, we could probably stop it there.
Yeah,
but
anyway, I think that's enough.
Yeah, that is enough. I just wanted to say that's a bishop from the, I can never say it, the Episcopal Church, which has drag queen bishops. So that should put everything in perspective, let alone the haircut.
Right. It's just so funny.
He did respond to it on social media if you want to look it up. But they all had this poker face. And there is that moment when you look and you can see J.D. Vance look over at Trump like, is he going to make it through this? But the rest of them just had their poker face on, which was pretty good.
Yeah, I was actually pretty surprised at their ability to just kind of sit there and eye roll. And I mean, J.D. Vance is probably the most animated of them all, which was tame at best. But yeah, I myself, like sometimes my face says more than what I actually will say, and I would not have been able to sit there so poker face as some of them were. Anyway, we didn't get to anything really Davos related, but for anybody at home that wants to see who's who in the zoo, as David Menzies would say, in Davos, Switzerland at the World Economic Forum, you can visit our special website, wefreports.com. We have a whole team there. We're actually operating with a skeleton of a team here in Canada because there's so many of them there in Davos. We have Avi, Sheila, Ezra just joined today, and then we have a couple videographers joining them there as well. And so we will wrap up our Wednesday live stream. We'll be back here again Friday, same time, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern, because we still have such a huge team in Davos. I'm not sure who will be co-hosting on Friday, so stay tuned, but maybe it'll just be Drea and myself once again. So thanks so much for everybody who joined us. Thanks to everybody who gave us a Rumble rant, and be sure to join us again on Friday for more of the craziest news of the day, as Canada and the US engage in a sadly looming trade war in the days and week ahead. So without further ado, stay safe and stay sane.
Information can have very real impacts, not only for an individual, but for populations. So that's where I work. So I'll speak a couple of things. One is impact of vaccination, of course, vaccination uptake, and any future pandemic response. If you sort of top of mind, kind of just key examples. So I think, so the Public Health Agency and Health Canada Commission, the Council of Canadian Academies do a report called Fault Lines, which very clearly sort of show, this is an independent sort of research showing that when the COVID vaccine became available between March and November of 2021, the lack of vaccine confidence, which is linked to misinformation, but also other factors like access and you know, can really impact your health, because they calculated that like 2,800 avoidable deaths are related to people's distrust, I think, of vaccines, and hundreds of millions of dollars of hospitalization costs. So that's just an example that was done in one point in time.